Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Patrick Holford. Patrick Holford is the Chief Executive Officer of foodforthebrain.org and the author of 47 books, including the new book, Upgrade Your Brain. You can find out more about Patrick Holford and his very important work at his website, foodforthebrain.org. Welcome, Patrick Holford.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Patrick Holford, why do you think so many people in Western culture are getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease?
Well, it's not just Alzheimer's. All over the world, we're seeing an increase in ADHD, autism, depression, insomnia, anxiety, Parkinson's. So, not just psychological problems, neurological problems. And the real shocker last month was a major global study published in the Lancet Neurology, said that 43% of the world's population, 3.4 billion people, have disability due to a neurological or brain problem. So dementia is just one factor here. And by the way, it's every 3 seconds someone is diagnosed with dementia. So that's the scale of the problem is massive. And I think it is not only, but largely to do with a very, very simple fact, which is that we have moved so far away from the diet that actually made us Homo sapiens in the first place. And this was a diet of wild foods, for reasons I'm sure we'll go into, very rich in marine foods, so seafood, which gives you omega-3 and vitamin D and B12 and zinc and minerals and so on. Obviously, all organic, all whole. And today we're eating ultra-processed foods, we're eating sugar, we're eating, nutrient-poor foods. And literally, we are in a process now of devolving, and dementia is part of that. And this is avoidable. That's the really important point to make. I mean, only 1% of Alzheimer's is caused by genes.
Now, Patrick Holford, your research shows that the human brain, over time, that human brains have lost 20% of their size. So
yeah, it is extraordinary. I mean, and sort of tragic. I mean, a fundamental question to ask in relation to brain health is how did we become Homo sapiens in the first place? And a chimpanzee has a brain size of 350 cc or grams. And by the way, a lion, even a really clever, land-based animal, is still more or less the same, not more than 400 grams. And we, Homo sapiens, peaked about 20, 30,000 years ago with a brain size almost 1,700 grams. It's not the genes that did it, because the genes are only 1% different. So it had to be a change in environment. That's very, very important. It had to be that. And the genius, Professor Michael Holford, who I just interviewed, he's 94 years old. He's just published a paper. He's worked out how the photons, our eye, that actually turn into the precise image that we see, how I see you and the color and the shape and everything. No one's ever had an adequate explanation for how that occurs. He's done it with quantum physics. And it's all to do with omega-3 DHA. And omega-3 DHA is not in walnuts or flax seeds or chia seeds. It's very specifically in seafood. And going back into the 70s, and in fact, I got into this field in the 70s, and he was one of my inspirations. I've dedicated the book to him and a few other key scientists. He analyzed the type of fatty acids in the organs of 70 different animals, and basically the liver, the heart, and so on. The organs varied according to where the animal lived and what they ate, except for the brain. Without a single exception, every single brain of every single animal, from a mouse to an elephant, the predominant fatty acid is omega-3 DHA. In other words, you cannot build a brain without omega-3 DHA. And we kind of know it. The nervous system and brain evolved in the sea. We came from the sea onto the land. And in fact, he showed, and it's kind of exquisite, that omega-3 DHA, it's docosahexaenoic acid, a 6 double bond horseshoe, had the ability to convert solar energy, photons, into effectively an electrical shock, a twitch. And that's how it all started, some billion years ago. Some organism, we think it was the dinoflagellate, incorporates omega-3 DHA into its structure, and it gets a twitch towards food. It's the beginning of the nervous system, the beginning of the brain. And, nowadays, many kids have no seafood at all. And you literally cannot build a brain without the building materials. And one of the biggest mistakes that's been made in human nutrition is to emphasize protein and size. You see, the bigger an animal gets, usually the smaller its brain gets. You have like a rhinoceros, massive 1-ton body made from eating grass, which is only 7% protein. So all the energy goes into building mass, and there's really nothing left, to build the brain. Us humans, on the other hand, a baby is born with 70% of all its brain cells already built. And it's totally dependent on that, that supply of omega-3 DHA. And if a woman doesn't have it, and this has been shown exquisitely in a lovely study of over 11,000 women, where the amount of seafood they consumed in pregnancy predicted their child's cognitive function and abilities at every age up to the age of 8. The study looked from 2 to 4 to 6 to 8. So we're built out of food. That's the point. And the brain particularly is built out of omega-3 DHA.
So Patrick Holford, what exactly is homocysteine, and why is it important, if we're wanting to prevent Alzheimer's disease, that we actually do lab tests to test our homocysteine levels?
Yeah. Well, I say there are 4 horsemen of the mental health apocalypse, and one of them is the brain fats, not just omega-3, but also vitamin D. And the second are the B vitamins, which do something called methylation. And basically, every second, there's almost 1 billion of these methylation reactions happening in your brain and body that turn genes on or off, make neurotransmitters, make insulin, make adrenaline, all sorts of stuff. It's like the master control, this thing called methylation. And it depends upon vitamin B12, B6, and folate. Now, B12 is only in animal foods, eggs, meat, fish, milk, and so on. Folate is in green foods, as in foliage. So the point is that if you don't have enough B vitamins, you don't do methylation properly. And you know that because you start to get an increase of a toxic amino acid called homocysteine. And the reason we know about homocysteine is because back some 20 or so years ago at Oxford University, the group who was studying Alzheimer's and defined what it was, because I should make it clear here that you diagnose dementia on the basis of a cognitive function test. And we offer a free one, by the way, on our website. 420,000 people have done it. 100 do it every day. You can diagnose dementia on the basis of losing cognitive function and pick up changes 30 years before a diagnosis. We'll talk about that. But you can only diagnose Alzheimer's by doing this brain scan and seeing a shrinkage of a central area of the brain. It's a disease. It's not a natural consequence of the aging process. You do not need to get it. My professor, Michael Crawford, he's just about to turn 94, sharp as a razor. You do not need to lose your brain at any age. You really do not, if you do the right things. Now, they found a high level of homocysteine in the Alzheimer's brains. So he devised a very good study, a large randomized placebo-controlled trial giving homocysteine-lowering B vitamins or placebo to these people with pre-dementia called mild cognitive impairment. And he was able to show, well, originally, he showed that there was 53% less shrinkage in the brain in 1 year from the B vitamins But a few years later, he thought, you know, to actually make a brain cell, you have to bind in the omega-3. And the B vitamins or the methylation does the binding in. So he realized, you know, these are codependent. You got to have both. So he went back to his original blood samples and he looked and he split the group of people into the third lowest omega-3, third highest. And he found in the third lowest omega-3, the B vitamins didn't work at all. But the third highest omega-3 had 73% less brain shrinkage. Now, that compares to these new anti-amyloid drugs, which in 1 year, same kind of study, same measures, have produced 20% increased rate of brain shrinkage on the drug versus the placebo, while the B vitamins in people with sufficient omega-3, 73% less shrinkage. So then the question you ask is, well, and by the way, I'm 66, and most people over 65, the majority, half at least, have a homocysteine level above 11, which is the point at which brain shrinkage is occurring. So mine's 7, which is optimal, but most people my age would be above 11, and their brain is shrinking. They're heading in the direction, and we can stop it. And actually, my wife and I, because homocysteine should be really easy to test, but it isn't. But recently, we cracked. We worked with some absolute brilliant scientists, and we've worked out accurately how to measure it on a home test kit. So we send you a kit, prick your finger, we can measure it. My wife and I had it. Mine was 7, hers was 15. Okay, so she's in the brain shrinking zone. So as a consequence, I take a multivitamin, gives me 10 microgram of B12. It's fine. But she's obviously, and this is terribly common, a malabsorber of vitamin B12. So she needs 500 micrograms. So she took a supplement which contains high dose B12, B6, folate, and a couple of other nutrients. And 3 months later, her homocysteine level is 8. So she's way out of the danger zone. And when you think that like 1 in 2 people over 65 will unknowingly have a homocysteine level that is that high and could so easily reduce it. And now we know that you can take all the omega-3 in the world and it will not work if your homocysteine is high. You could have all the B vitamins in the world and they will not work if your omega-3 level is low. This is a very, very important discovery.
Now, on your website, foodforthebrain.org, people can order home test kits and to test these major factors, yes. Homocysteine level, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids. And what else do they test?
Also HbA1c, or what we call glycosylated hemoglobin. Because, so we'll talk about sugar. We are already seeing in teenagers with metabolic syndrome, with sugar problems, already at the age of 15, we are seeing shrinkage of that area of the brain that is the definition of Alzheimer's. We are seeing loss in cognitive function that mirrors, what occurs later in dementia. By the age of 40, even if your blood sugar level is in the normal range, but the high end of normal, we can predict a 15% increased risk of dementia. So sugar is a big factor. And we're talking here about eating low carbs, less sugar. So a doctor diagnoses diabetes if 6.5% of your red blood cells are sugar damaged, which is called HbA1c. And if you're above 6.5% HbA1c, diabetes. 6%, pre-diabetes. 5%, perfect. So we want to get people to measure, like omega-3 index, which is really important. It actually measures the omega-3 DHA and EPA in the membrane of red blood cells. And in Japan, the average is 10%. Above 8% is healthy. In the UK and US, it's about 4%. So you might say, well, I eat fish a couple of times a week. I'm sure I'm fine. Well, why don't you find out? And one of the interesting things is, like we just learned, if you've got a homocysteine problem, you won't bind your omega-3s in. So now here's something fascinating, which is not in my book. The cognitive, years back in 2010, when David Smith did his study and the results, I was there when he cracked the code and the results were amazing. He's the second in charge of Oxford Medical School. And I said, now what? I mean, this is an amazing discovery. And he said, well, I hope within 5 years, it will be standard policy in the National Health Service. And I said, what would the policy be? And he said, number one, you've got to measure cognitive function in everyone from the age of 50, because you can pick up changes many decades ahead. If not good, measure the blood homocysteine. Of course, we could just measure the blood homocysteine. If above 11, which is where brain shrinkage starts, or above 10, give the B vitamins. So, he hoped that that would be the policy. And I was very skeptical, because I've lived through too many breakthroughs in nutrition being buried. So I got permission to digitize the proper cognitive function test as done in memory clinics. And about 2015, we made it available, and about 100 people do it every day. We've tested 420,000 people. It's free. It's accurate. And by the way, if you go, oh, I don't want to know, you do want to know, because also after it, there's a questionnaire you fill out, and it works out exactly what's driving your risk. That's the point. And so here's the interesting thing, because, when I ask the experts who developed all this, they'll say, if you're kind of a bit bad, we'll call it orange range, that's mild cognitive impairment. And if you're a lot bad, that's when we diagnose dementia. But otherwise, you're okay. There's this vast area of okay, which is called green. So last week, we analyzed the results of hundreds of thousands of people who've done their cognitive function test over their age. And there is a steady drop in cognitive function from the age of 18 to the age of 95. I mean, it's extraordinary. A 20-year-old has more cognitive function than a 25-year-old, who has more than a 30-year-old, who has more than a 35-year-old. So actually, it's dropping year on year. And we had one guy, by the way, who did the test, and he'd been doing it every year since 2015. And sure enough, every year, it goes down. And then we brought out the homocysteine test, and he tested himself, and he was high. And then he took the B vitamins to lower it. And in the last 2 years, it's just gone up. And he's now got more cognitive function now than he had 5 years ago. So the point is, the average person is having a cognitive drop every single year. But who wants to be average? And I don't think that needs to happen. But the amazing thing is that we now know how to stop this, how to dementia-proof your diet and your lifestyle. And it's going to affect everything. It's going to reduce the risk in children of ADHD, autism, depression, anxiety, sleep problems, and so on. So my book, Upgrade Your Brain, is entirely about how to do this. And
so, Patrick Holford, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. You're listening to Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, and Patrick Holford, the CEO of foodforthebrain.org. And we're talking about what you can do to lower your risk of Alzheimer's disease.
By the way, what date does this go out?
And we need to be quiet right now, so we'll be right back. So Patrick Holford, during my lifetime, I've actually run 2 radio shows, and I'll never forget interviewing Dr. Barry Sears, who's widely recognized as an expert on healthy fatty acids. And one of the things that he said, because so many people say, oh, I eat fish, or I think I can get everything I need from my diet. he said, and I'll never forget, and if you are listening to what I have to say, this is what I want you to remember. Dr. Barry Sears said you would have to eat 15 cans of tuna every single day to get enough omega-3 fatty acids in your diet. So, Patrick Holford, how do you really believe that we need to supplement omega-3 fatty acids, and how much would you recommend the average person supplement?
Well, if you go back to understanding that we became human because we had a diet that was basically a marine food diet, we obviously lived along rivers and estuaries and so on. And in fact, where I live in Wales, they found a 40,000-year-old complete Homo sapiens remains, and they analyzed the bones, and about a quarter of their diet was marine food. Now, let's imagine that they were expending at least double the calories walking, hunting, gathering wood, and so on, probably more. But the point is, if they were expending double the calories, they're eating, twice as much than we do today. We would have to have half of our entire diet from marine food to get the kind of level of omega-3 and B12 and vitamin D that they were eating. And there lies the problem, because we're kind of lazy. We've got cars, we've got fridges, we've got home delivery, and so we don't need to eat so much. So to make it real, you need about a minimum of 2 grams of omega-3, and some would say more. And to do that, you're going to have to eat oily fish 3 times a week and supplement every day. And the amount of DHA you want to find in the supplement is about 500 milligrams. So that's what I do. How do you know that's enough? By the way, too much doesn't really matter. There's no sort of overdose. The answer is do the blood test. It's only, $50. Find out what your omega-3 index is. If you're already in the 8, +%, fine. I did mine and I was 9%. So I know that what I do, which is oily fish 3 times a week and supplement omega-3, I know that that's good. So yeah, it's a brain essential. That and the B vitamins. And by the way, what those are doing is literally building your brain. So really, you've got to look at the structure, the function, and then the utilization. And the function is how it's fueled. And the irony is, the more sugar you eat, the more insulin resistant you become. And insulin drives the glucose into cells. So basically, you end up, your brain ends up sugar starved as a consequence of eating too much sugar. And that's why what we're hearing now a lot of is that the brain can and actually loves to run on ketones generated from fat. So, there's ketogenic diets. In fact, behind me is a lovely book. Where is it? Here, Dr. Georgia Ede. And, change your diet, change your mind. And she has had remarkable recoveries from schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, and so on, by switching people over to a diet of very, very little carbs, more fats, which generate this stuff called ketones. And by the way, ketones are made specifically from a kind of fat, which is called a medium chain triglyceride, but one particular, which is called C8. So the reason I'm telling you that is that back in December, a man called Alan, nicknamed Nodge, Norris, his wife started to find him in different rooms at night because he couldn't find the toilet in his own house. This led to a visit to the memory clinic where they do the cognitive function test, do the brain scan. It's how you diagnose Alzheimer's, which is 2/3 of dementia. And he was diagnosed with mixed dementia, both Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. And his wife said, well, what can we do? And the answer was nothing. A few months later, they tried to enroll him in a drug trial. 7 people have died in the last 2 drug trials, by the way. It's published in the journals, but people are not really paying attention. So they went on the web, they found foodforthebrain.org, they did the online cognitive function test, and sure enough, he was in the red zone. And they filled in the questionnaire, and it was quite shocking. And as a consequence, he started to supplement the B vitamins and omega-3 and eat more fish, cut right back on sugar. Every day he had 2 tablespoons of something called keto fast, which is the C8 oil. He started to go to bed a bit earlier because sleep's important for brain recovery. And that's the utilization. He started to do more activities, social, intellectual, physical. He's actually joined a Morris dancing group now. At the time, he couldn't really conceive of tomorrow. So there was no way he could plant out his spring garden. He was a great gardener. He was a computer programmer. He struggled to turn his computer on or off. He couldn't both eat and talk. It was like one or the other. And now he's planted his whole spring garden, and he's back on the computer. And actually on May the 15th, we launched globally in China, Japan, UK, and US, Alzheimer's Prevention Day. And there's a challenge, which I'd like to ask your viewers to do, which is to make a 30-second film on something that you do that helps prevent dementia. And you will see Nodge and Dorothy, his wife. They say, we go foraging. It engages our mind and our body. That's how we help to prevent Alzheimer's dementia.
Now, Patrick Holford, foodforthebrain.org offers home tests where individuals can test their vitamin D, their hemoglobin A1C, which is a measure of how your blood sugar, your omega-3 fatty acids, and your homocysteine level. How much do your brain test kits cost? And can you give this in English pounds and US dollars?
Yeah, in English pounds, it's under 180 pounds. And in American dollars, it's around $220 to do everything. You know,
To test for everything.
Yeah.
Now,
and it is available in the US and in the UK and in Europe. And behind this, just to sort of understand it, is that we've tested over 400,000 people. So we've now got, and we call them citizen scientists. So I'm sure you want to do the test for yourself, which is why we exist, and we'll guide you as to how to make changes. But you're also becoming a citizen scientist because we now know your cognitive function, and we'll ask you to retest every year. And we know your diet and lifestyle behaviors, and we ask you to reassess them as well. And now, if you choose, we can measure your biology. So we now have a database specifically focused on cognitive function that is unlike any in the world. Because what breaks my heart, and it's one of the reasons the book is also dedicated to Professor David Smith and Professor Helga Refsum, who really is one of the best female scientists of our generation who discovered homocysteine and really put it on the map, is that these scientists, all worthy of a Nobel Prize, without any shadow of a doubt, who have published hundreds of impeccable studies, brain scans, randomized controlled trials. I mean, one of the drug companies came to Professor David Smith and said, if this was patentable, this is a multi-billion-dollar drug.
Now,
but we can't patent it because it exists in nature. So what breaks my heart is these scientists have spent their entire life doing this impeccable work because they believe and they want, when it's published in the journal, the governments and the health departments to put it into action, and they're not. So what we're doing at Food for the Brain, with your help as a citizen scientist, is it's research science by the people, for the people, funded by the people, because people can donate, and many do, £50 a year. And the results go straight back to you in a way that you can change your behavior. So we're sort of cutting out the middlemen. And as a consequence of this model, we have had the world's best scientists joining us. I mean, even last week, America's #1 expert on omega-3, Professor Bill Harris, has joined our scientific advisory group. There's a brilliant dental, functional medicine dentist called Dr. Victoria Sampson. The link between gum disease and dementia is really interesting, and she's leading that work. She's joined our scientific group. There isn't a single body, charity or university that has the wealth of expertise that we've got, and they're all doing it for nothing
So
because they know
Patrick
this is
Holford, this brings me to the next question. So we want to prevent Alzheimer's disease. How does good dental health and taking care of our teeth help us to take care of our brain?
Okay, so here's a shocking statistic. 10 years of gum disease increases risk of Alzheimer's by 70%.
Oh my goodness.
And there is a particular, in the same way we know the gut has a microbiome, you know, a bacterial balance, the mouth, there's an oral microbiome. And there's one particular bacteria called P. gingivalis, which is found both in the mouth and in the brain. So sometimes we hear about the gut-blood barrier, and sometimes we hear about the blood-brain barrier. But the point is, things are also getting pathogens, in this case, pathogenic bacteria, also get into the brain. And a lot of these bacteria exist between teeth. So if you brush your teeth, and you should do it for 2 minutes, and you floss your teeth, you are tremendously promoting your oral, microbiome. And so when we talk about healthy gut, actually the first part of the gut is your mouth, and it's terribly important. And the amazing thing, I mean, that actually is not in my book. So, I mean, there is not a week when I'm not learning. I mean, there was a lovely study last week which showed that if you have a mundane job, it increases your risk of Alzheimer's. So again, we need to use the brain. Seeing, cataracts increase risk for dementia. If you have cataract replacement, it reduces risk. Hearing loss increases risk. Hearing aids reduce risk. So if you're using your brain and you're learning things, retirement increases risk. I'm 66. I've just got my paraglider license. So I've been learning aeronautics and meteorology, and I'm really, learning all the time. And there's no point where that really should stop. And then what's terribly important is, what does a dog do after a good walk? And the answer is sleep. So sleep is how we repair the brain. Inside those little brain cells, you've got that omega-3, and it's kind of detaching and changing with every single reaction. It's said that almost every single DHA molecule is released every single day and then reconstituted. It's a ton of energy going on there, which creates also a ton of exhaust fumes, which are the oxidants that we must touch on as well. And it's hard work, so you need to sleep. And one of the classics is that a dolphin actually has a bigger brain size than us, but it turns out that the dolphin has 2 brains because it can't go to sleep. It would drown. So it can turn off one half and keep swimming and then turn off the other half. So it looks like it's got a bigger brain than us. Well, it does, but it's actually not bigger. It's just doubled up.
So
sleep
Patrick
is how we repair. Yeah.
Let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. You're listening to what you can do to prevent Alzheimer's. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer. So Patrick Holford, we've all heard that the average person should eat 5 to 7 servings of fruits and vegetables every day for general health. How does a high antioxidant diet prevent Alzheimer's disease?
Well, it's exactly the right question, because when you're generating all this energy in your brain and producing the exhaust fume, the oxidants, you've got to mop them up. And vitamin C, by the way, very clear evidence. People who supplement vitamin C, studies of giving supplements of vitamin C reduce risk for Alzheimer's dementia. It's one of the absolute best of all. And yeah, fruit and veg, berries, particularly rich in those anthocyanidins, the blue purple things. We hear about broccoli and kale and so on. Organic is better. But one of the interesting shockers, and I live on a farm in Wales, and I came across this man called Dan Kittredge, who is the founder of the Bionutrient Research Institute. And he's analyzed thousands of samples of food, and mainly across the US. And, we'd like to say organic is better or biodynamic is better, whatever. Doesn't matter how it's grown. It doesn't matter if it's bought in a supermarket or a farm shop or anything. He finds 40-fold variation in the antioxidant level, from one carrot to another. And it's very much like I'm talking about. If you don't have the right nutrients in the soil, it doesn't matter how you grow it, it won't be nutritious. The same principles apply to plants as they do to humans. And recently, one of the things we've learned is that the two most powerful antioxidants of all is vitamin C and glutathione. Many people will have heard of glutathione. It's the master antioxidant in the body. It's so incredibly reactive, and it's actually reloaded by anthocyanidins, the blue-red foods. And a lot of people were, in America, supplementing N-acetylcysteine, NAC, from which you can make glutathione, but it's been banned. And the reason it's been banned is the question was, is it a medicine because it's been used medically, or is it a food? And they've decided it's a medicine, and therefore it can't be sold as food. In other words, it's sort of been banned in America because it works. That's the bottom line. And what we learned is that basically you've got all these metabolic fires going on all around your body and your brain. And it's ultimately why we age and why our skin looks older and so on. And along comes the fire truck full of water, and that water is glutathione, and the glutathione puts out the fire, which then becomes steam. And that's what we call oxidized glutathione. And then there's a clever little enzyme called glutathione reductase, which turns the steam back to water. And there's a cycle. And what we find is people with dementia, this cycle goes really, really slowly. And they have much less water and much more steam. So actually in June, we are releasing and adding a fifth measure into our home test, which is called the glutathione index. It's a world first. It's the ratio between the fully loaded glutathione and the spent or oxidized glutathione. So one's going to say, yeah, I eat fruit and veg, I'm fine, find out, find out. And then where we're going to with all this is we hope when we have enough data, we can actually have an index of risk. You see, in England, I'm going to give you an example of this. They've just released 5 million quid from Bill Gates, People's Lottery, and wherever, to run a trial on 5,000 people. So it's £1,000 a person, measuring a level of p-tau in the blood. And it's a toxic amino acid that we all make. You go from tau to p-tau, and it's linked to neurofibrillary tangles, which occur in the brain. And they're going to measure it. And of course, they'll find it, because we know it's there. And then they'll run it for a couple of years. Say, oh, we found that people who develop memory problems and dementia have high p-tau. Why are they doing it? So they can turn around and say, and therefore need the p-tau drug. It's like cholesterol and statins. It was so clever the way cholesterol was, you could be perfectly healthy like I am, have a cholesterol above a magic number, and they say, you need to be on the cholesterol-lowering drug. It's the same model. Now, actually, if you've learned already that dementia is diagnosed not by p-tau, but by a cognitive function test. So you don't need a blood test to diagnose who's going to get dementia. You just need a cognitive function test. And then the question is, what's causing it this person? Is it the sugar? Is it the omega-3s? Is it the homocysteine and so on? And that's when you can test and find out what's driving this person's cognitive decline, because it's not all the same.
Now, Patrick Holford, as we all know, exercise is part of a healthy lifestyle, but it's also good for the brain. So my understanding is that somebody on a bicycle, riding a bicycle, has more brain activity than somebody watching an educational video. How much exercise do we actually need to prevent Alzheimer's disease?
Well, it's not that much. If you go to extreme, literally 2 minutes of sprinting will do it. if you're gardening, if you're doing like a sort of moderate exercise, maybe half an hour. If you're jogging, it could be 10 minutes. But what we've actually learned is that what has the biggest effect on the brain are exercises that require coordination. So, obviously being on a bike, I mean, if you're on a bike machine, you don't need anything like the same level of balance control that you do if you're actually riding a bike. Dancing, would be absolutely fantastic. So anything that's really engaging, the balance, coordination muscle is fantastic. At the other side, things like learning a musical instrument where you're having to coordinate your fingers and then this, is absolutely fantastic. So you're kind of, mixing things up. And actually, the best predictor of brain size is your muscle mass. And if you think about it, what happens is all this exercise, building muscle, etc., is stimulating circulation. And your brain has thousands of miles of arteries. So the exercise helps to get the nutrients in the brain. The balancing, etc., helps to stimulate those connections. So it's all part of it. But what's really fascinating is like sleep is a big risk, a lack of sleep for dementia, but not in people who do a lot of exercise, or less so. Similarly, pollution is a big risk for dementia, but not in people whose homocysteine level is low. And if you think about it, like the National Institute of Health attributed 22% of the risk of Alzheimer's to raised homocysteine, B vitamins, 22% to omega-3. But even that has to be an underestimate, because in the studies that gave omega-3, which had a modest effect, there was a subgroup who were low in homocysteine who had no effect, but the average was some effect. So we've underestimated the power of exercise, the power of omega-3, the power of sugar, and all the rest of it, because we haven't realized that these things are all sort of interactive. So the magic of what we're doing at Food for the Brain with our cognition biobank and the book, and you'll really get it, when you read the book, is as soon as you put all the, if you add up the percentage of risk reduction you could have for Alzheimer's, it ends up as being many thousands of percent, So, but when you put all the pieces together, you go, you don't need to get this thing. It's not necessary. You do not need to die without your mind.
Great message. And I know myself, I'm 65. I've taught yoga for 29 years. And the scientific research shows that older women who have practiced yoga for 8 years or more have more gray matter in their brain, right?
Absolutely. You literally build your brain in that way. But what would be fascinating is that, if you could measure that, which you can, of course, is maybe yoga teachers who were low in omega-3, would not have developed quite that level of brain matter. So it's a combination. And what we've done with the world's leading scientists is we've created on May the 15th, Alzheimer's Prevention Day. And there is a website, which is alzheimersprevention.info, which actually launches tomorrow on May the 1st. And anyone can go there. And you'll see that each of these scientists, like Dr. Georgia Ede has done a 3-minute film, Professor Bill Harris, he's done one on omega-3. I've done one on homocysteine. Tommy Wood has done one on building muscle. There are all these films that you can just get a quick bite of something that you can do. There's a 30-question 3-minute check. So it's much simpler than what we're doing at the charity, where you can just answer these questions and instantly it will show you what's driving your risk the most. And then if you wish, you can go and do the full test and so on. And then we have an ice bucket challenge, which is to make this 30-second film of yourself, on a cell phone, a mobile phone, of something that you do that helps prevent Alzheimer's, and then post it to us, and we'll frame it, send it back, share it in social media, because this is purely a communication problem. It's not a science problem. We've got all the science we need. We understand what's driving all this mental ill health from a nutritional, well, both nutritional and psychological level. The issue is simply communication. And we want to change the paradigm from waiting for a cure. I'll just wait and then, oh God, I've got a problem. Doctor, is there a drug for this? Which there won't be because it's a systems-based, problem, to actually taking charge of your life, knowing that you are the architect of your own brain's future, and doing things. And they don't have to be big. They could be flossing your teeth, eating less sugar, having some omega-3, exercising, learning something, And what we'll find out in a few years is, maybe there's a magic combination of 5 things that if you just do these, you have dementia-proofed yourself.
Very powerful information. And for our audience, that's alzheimersprevention.info.
That's correct. Yeah.
So you've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Our guest today has been Patrick Holford, author of 47 books, including his new book, Upgrade Your Brain. And you can learn more about what we've been talking about at his wonderful website, foodforthebrain.org. And you can also go to alzheimersprevention.info. And remember that less than 1% of Alzheimer's is actually genetic. And if you listen to Patrick Holford, you can dramatically reduce your chances of getting Alzheimer's naturally. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.